Talk Politics with Congressman Tim Griffin is brought to you by the Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce and Associated Industries of Arkansas, because business matters. Impact Management Group, Public Relations and Public Affairs, over a decade of issue advocacy success. Connect Arkansas, empowering entrepreneurs and Arkansans through greater utilization of the Internet. And ConwayArkansas.org. Get smart. Visit ConwayArkansas.org and see why Conway is the smart choice for business, education, and more.
All right, welcome to this latest edition of Talk Politics. I'm your host, Roby. We're with Congressman Tim Griffin. He represents the 2nd Congressional District in Arkansas. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
If you want to participate in the conversation, we've already got some questions in queue, but yours are welcome to come along. Just make sure that through Twitter and Facebook, you use the Talk Politics hashtag. That's how we will get it. So,
great.
Let's begin with a little presidential politics.
Sure.
We've got a couple of questions on this. I'm going to summarize from several people in here. You're the state chair for the Romney for President campaign. He has been stumbling in some elections lately.
He has.
And has been struggling in the polls a little bit lately. If Mitt Romney does not win Michigan, or if he doesn't win convincingly, and I think Arizona is coming up as well, does this kind of open up the GOP presidential primary to a new entrant or another candidate?
I think he needs to win Michigan. I really do. I think that he needs to show strength in that state where he has a lot of roots. I'd like to see him win it convincingly. Certainly I think that the water will be will have more mud in it, less clear. If he does not win it, you will have several candidates who feel like they've got a stake or have a chance to win the whole thing, because you'll have, instead of one candidate who's done well or won a number of states or most of the states, you'll have several candidates who have won some. And they will each be encouraged to stay in longer. I endorsed Romney because I felt like, and still feel like, he's the best of the ones in the race to beat President Obama in the fall. So, but yeah, he needs a decisive win.
What do you make of this anybody but Romney mentality that seems to be out there? I mean, we've seen Rick Perry, Herman Cain, Rick Santorum's the hot property now. Yeah. Newt Gingrich obviously has had 2 surges. But
sure.
Why is this dissatisfaction?
The sense that I get talking to people in my party is that they want to see more passion. And a lot of people are really frustrated with what's going on in this administration in particular. And they don't just disagree, they're downright, some of them are downright angry, some of them are downright scared, a lot of them are downright frustrated. And they want to know that their leaders get that. And I get it, I hear it, I see it. And I think that Governor Romney gets it, but he's got to communicate that. And I've said as much. And so I think that's part of it. I think the other part, because that helps you connect with people. People want you to feel what they're feeling. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. If you want some serious change, you want someone who gets that there needs to be serious change. And as I've said 100 times, tweaking at the edges, whether it be the debt or whatever, is not going to do what we need done. We need bold changes, and so I think he's got to address that. I also think he's got to continue to communicate with conservatives so they feel comfortable that some of his positions years ago were years ago and are going to stay in the past. But if you look at any of these candidates, if you look at Rick Santorum, I saw something a couple of days ago where he was pro-choice years ago until he ran for office. So, no one's perfect. I think the key is who's the best candidate to beat President Obama, and I think it's Governor Romney.
Last question on this. Do you think this potentially goes on long enough that someone else gets in the race, whether it's through the convention process or someone else just senses there's no one kind of coalescing the overall coalition?
I think that's highly unlikely. I think it's highly unlikely. Just the way the process is set up these days, it's highly unlikely that we would go into late summer confused as to who the nominee will be. I guess anything's possible, but I think that's highly unlikely.
All right, maybe Arkansas's primary will be in play for the decisive votes there.
Maybe so.
Then all the pressure will be on Congressman Tim Griffin, the Romney chairman, to deliver. So,
don't give me that responsibility.
All right, we asked a question on our Facebook page about which foreign policy issue people would like to hear you address. Iran was the topic most of the voters requested. You're on the Readiness Committee of the Armed Forces Committee. Are we ready to deal with Iran?
Well, I'm glad Iran was the number one, is the number one question, because we had a little bipartisan, it really wasn't a hearing, it was a get-together of a lot of foreign affairs. I'm on the Foreign Affairs Committee as well. We had a little foreign affairs get-together with some of the folks from Stop a Nuclear Iran and some other people who have been real engaged on this issue. I think that this is one of those deals where it's never going to be easy to do. And the longer we wait to deal with it, however we deal with it, the more difficult it will be. I think that you've got a madman in charge of Iran, and they have, this is not guesswork, they have said, or some of the leaders in Iran have said, that they are dead set on attacking or dealing with Israel, however you describe dealing with Israel. And so I think this is one where the president's got to be forward-leaning, whether it's dealing with them in the Straits of Hormuz and dealing with their attempted blockade, whether it's making sure Israel is is able to defend itself, coordinating with Israel, because we don't want anything. In my view, we want to be, whatever happens on this, we want to be working hand in hand with our allies in the region. But this is the next pressure point, and I would say that a lot of people scoffed at the axis of evil comment made by President Bush years ago. I did not. If you'll remember, he was referring to North Korea, Iran, and Iraq. And they have all turned out to be areas where there are potentially big problems now. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. But every option has to be on the table, and the president, has been pretty clear, I think, on that. I think he probably needs to be even more engaged with regard to Iran. And this is one where New York liberals join with Southern conservatives. I mean, this is truly an area where we can have some bipartisanship because, to be blunt, that guy's crazy.
Best case scenario, worst case scenario for what could happen next?
Best case scenario would be that showing force in the region the way we have in the Strait over there with aircraft carriers and what have you, that they finally realize that they need to get in line with the international community. However, I don't think they'll do that. And even if they do, what does that mean? That means they quit provoking and they go back to quietly building their nuclear capacity. I mean, that's not a good option. But I guess the best option is that they would just say, okay, we want to comply with and address international concerns. The worst option, since no option is off the table, would be that at some point military action has to be taken. And I don't think that from talking to people, constituents and folks around the country, I don't think most Americans are ready for that. So there would clearly need to be a lot of discussion within this democracy, and a lot of communicating with constituents and figuring out where people stand. But I think it is a huge problem, and both on a practical level, in terms of what it could mean to the region, but also in terms of, I mean, we ought to be scared of them having nuclear weapons that they can launch to other continents.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's something we'll certainly follow up with. Kind of on the same topic, we have seen military cuts with the A-10 program in Fort Smith, possible National Guard cuts coming out of some of the federal budget cuts that are drifting down to the states. Is there anything on tap with the Little Rock Air Force Base? This is my first question. And my second question this is from Mike in Fort Smith. What are you hearing about possible military spending cuts and how they could impact Arkansas? Mm-hmm. Are you worried?
I think we've got a great case to make on the 188th and on Little Rock Air Force Base. So I want to be vigilant, but I am not worried. But really, the Little Rock Air Force Base and the 188th have to be addressed separately. First of all, Steve Womack, the 188th is in Womack's district, right, and he's taking the lead on that. And I have, in terms of the congressional delegation, and I have told him as a member of the Arkansas delegation, but as a member of the Armed Services Committee, I want to help him any way I can. And I have been engaged on that issue. I would say first, though, we have to distinguish between cuts that are to come as a result of sequestration and specific cuts on the one side, and specific cuts that the president has proposed. Okay, the sequestration thing has to do with overall amounts. The president, the things that are being listed as potential cuts in Arkansas were identified in the president's budget, specifically by the administration. So,
which I've heard you say has very little chance to zero chance of becoming law.
Yes, and the reason is, and there's several issues here, but first of all, on the president's budget, the president has an obligation to propose a budget. He does that yearly. He should, but it's a starting point in the conversation. It is not the end point. And all you got to do is look at last year. Last year, the president proposed a budget. The president's budget got 0 votes in his own party's controlled Senate. The president's budget is not going to be the template for this country's spending. It's just not. The Senate's not going to back it. Democrats in the Senate, from what I'm told, don't even want it to come up for a vote because they know they'll have to vote against it, or it's certainly not going to pass the House. I'm not even sure we'll bring it up, but we'll have our own budget. So it's a starting point. So the fact that something's in the president's budget does not mean that it's gospel and going to happen. Okay. But with regard to the Little Rock Air Force Base and the 188th, the good news, and I've met with General Walford and others about the 188th. The good news on the 188th is they are proposing a new mission. So they're not taking away all of the resources there. They're just sort of putting a new mission under the 188.
It could lead to lower personnel.
Could.
Mm-hmm.
The folks I've talked to here are happy that they've proposed an alternative mission and not said you're going away altogether. But I will make the case. I'm all for the unmanned aircraft and drones. I believe they're a critical mission. But I would say this. There's a great case to be made for the A-10. The A-10 has been, not just in Arkansas, but over the years has been marked for elimination time and time again. And if you go to Iraq or Afghanistan, now Afghanistan, and you ask the boots on the ground, you ask the troops, you ask the soldiers, when you're going in to medevac someone in a Black Hawk, when you're going in and you need air cover of some sort, who do you want providing that air cover? And if they have a choice between, no offense to the other aircraft, but if they have a choice between an F-35 or an F-15 or 16 or whatever the aircraft is that flies at a high rate of speed and usually much higher, or they can choose the A-10 that can go really relatively slow and low and provide devastating cover for them, they're going to pick the A-10 every time, every single time. And for whatever reason, the Air Force repeatedly has said, well, you know, that's an old platform, as they call it. We probably need to move that out. I'll just tell you, it works. I'm a big believer in what the A-10 can do. So that battle is not decided yet, what's going to happen there. With regard to Little Rock Air Force Base, the main thing there is that the Air Force has focused on reducing on the guard side as opposed to the active duty side, which is odd. If you're saving money, you can save more money nationwide dealing with active duty just because of the many costs that are associated with full-time personnel and what have you. But out here, I think we're pretty fortunate. What they have basically said is we want to get rid of what's called AMP. I started a caucus in the House to advocate for the AMP. It's the Avionics Modernization Program. And what it basically does is it takes old C-130s that don't have the capacity to fly in Europe, that don't have night flying capacity, that don't have all the modern avionics that the new model has, and that upgrades it. It upgrades it at a pretty high cost, but it upgrades it. And Boeing does a lot of that work inside a Lockheed plane, C-130. And what they've said is, look, we want to go to a less sophisticated AMP. AMP Light is what some of them are calling it in the Air Force. That's what they want to do. The good news is they're not talking about abandoning the modernization of these old aircraft completely. The bad news is we saved a lot of money with AMP because AMP is so advanced when you put that new technology in the old C-130s that you're able to actually eliminate the need for the navigator person, that personnel position in the aircraft. So you take a person away that you're paying full time. That saved a lot of money because the newer ones don't need that position because of the technology. With the AMP Light, it would upgrade some of the stuff, but you'd still need that navigator position. Okay. So it really, there's a lot of details, but long story short, I feel really good about Little Rock Air Force Base. What I like to call every time I get a chance, the Little Rock difference. We do it differently at Little Rock Air Force Base and in that community, in this community, because of the support. We're the model nationwide. You can believe it. And so we've got a good story to tell, and I feel confident Little Rock Air Force Base is going to be fine.
All right, a question from Lee in North Little Rock. This deals with veterans, and I know you've got a public appearance, I think, tomorrow with the head of the Veterans Subcommittee there.
Yes.
Why have you gotten involved in the move of the Little Rock Veterans Administration Outreach Center and against the side of veterans is the question here.
Sure.
So.
Well, first of all, I am for veterans. I am a veteran. I served in Iraq in '06. I'm still serving in the reserve. I drill once a month. So I think that, first of all, to say that the Veterans Administration is the same as veterans is not true. Okay. They do a lot of good things for veterans, but they also are a federal agency that needs to follow the rules, just like if they were HUD or Commerce Department or any other agency. A lot of politicians are afraid to ever criticize the VA because veterans is in the name. I am a veteran, and I think that they need to do right by veterans, and I don't think the way they're conducting themselves on this issue has been the way they should. Why did I get involved? I got involved because my constituents asked me to get involved. My constituents include residents in Little Rock. My constituents include city officials in Little Rock. My constituents include lots of veterans. I have a Veterans Advisory Committee. I asked them. I had my staff call up every one of them. We have about 40 on that committee, I think, and asked them what they thought about it. There were I would say that, I forget the exact numbers, but there were a number of people on my Veterans Advisory Committee that said, you know, the VA is not acting right here. So,
what were they doing wrong?
Well, here's the deal. Anytime a federal agency takes a significant step in a community that they know might cause controversy, they ought to engage the public. That's it. That's it. They ought to work with people. It's interesting how I hear all the time, work with the other side, work with people, work with these people, but the VA doesn't have to. That's nonsense. Here's what happened. The VA for a long time has been looking for a place to relocate the day treatment center, no doubt about it. I toured that center. It needs to be relocated. It's too small, it's cramped, it needs to be relocated. But what happened is they signed a lease on a new location downtown that I think they knew would be controversial because of its location. And they didn't tell anyone until 2 months after the deal was done. So I went to a forum that was put together by a neighborhood association, listened to everybody. And I said, this has been incredibly instructive. I've heard from the VA, I've heard from residents, I've heard from business owners, incredibly instructive. My only question is, why are we having this after the ink's dry on the contract as opposed to before? Yes, they knew it was going to be controversial, but part of democracy is having that discussion. So my primary concern is that they did not engage the local stakeholders. And they've said, well, we can't, once it's in the contracting process, we can't discuss it. I think they had a good idea of what their options are before that process started. But we're still trying to get the facts. But the bottom line is, just like any other federal agency, they need to be a partner with the community. This is not about whether we should help veterans or not. Of course we should help veterans. They earned this, the benefits and the help, and they should get it. And look, Mayor Stodla and many others, we can all agree. We can all agree that we want to help veterans. I don't think the VA doing this and causing this by not reaching out to the community is good for anybody. So that's what we're dealing with here. But look, I am confident that we will get a solution that everybody can get on board with, and that's what we should have had from the start.
All right. This comes from your friend Max Brantley at the Arkansas
Yes.
blog. We allow questions from everyone. Are you against contraceptive coverage in the health care bill?
I have, if he's talking about the president's requirement that religious institutions, such as Catholic Charities or the Archdiocese of Little Rock, that they are required to provide contraception coverage to people, then I absolutely am against that, because these are individuals who, in their conscience, believe it is wrong, and they should not be forced to fund something they believe is wrong.
All right.
I thought you were going to ask me if I believe in contraception.
I'm not going there. This is from Martin by email. Why did you reverse your position on SOPA?
I'm glad he asked that. I talked to a number of people about this morning. I reversed my decision on the bill. I still fundamentally believe that we have got to address piracy. What I decided was that vehicle was not going to be the way to do it, because I said I would not take a position, I would not vote for legislation that my constituents, that I felt, based on emails, phone calls, letters, whatever, that I felt my constituents weren't comfortable with. And based on all of that information, I got the feeling that they weren't comfortable with it. And so I took my name off the legislation. But I want to be really clear. A lot of all of the problems that it was meant to address still exist. Piracy is a big problem, and it's mostly, particularly with regard to stealing movies and music. Mostly this is a foreign, Russia-based, China-based, foreign rogue website problem. It also exists with pharmaceuticals, where people go online, they buy what they think are cheap Lipitor or whatever, and they end up getting chalk pills, and they don't know what's in it, and they take it. In fact, Google just paid, I think, a $500 million settlement to a company because they were facilitating this type of thing. And so I still believe we've got to do something, but I believe we need a vehicle other than SOPA that will allow different stakeholders, including the online folks, to come together and address the problem. Because the bottom line is, unless they're on board, we're not going to successfully address it.
This, along the lines, another federal bill that has been out there is one that Congressman Steve Womack's a lead sponsor on, and that is to require online retailers to collect sales taxes. Yep. I think Senator Bozeman, Senator Pryor on board, Congressman Crawford's a co-sponsor. What are your views on that issue? Do you see yourself supporting Congressman Womack's bill?
Well, I would just say this. I have had numerous conversations about this bill. I am working on some things that I think will address my concerns about it, and I'll lay that out in a minute. And so I think that ultimately we may get to where I can sign on to it, but there's a few things that I want to work on first. My big concern is that some states, some governors, one individual who's in the House who's running for governor, have made it clear that to the extent this takes money out of people's pockets, they want to reduce the tax rate accordingly so that, yes, there is equality and fairness in the market, but they don't want to give a windfall to government to just grow government. So what basically a lot of them are proposing is, I think Mike Pence, who's running for governor of Indiana, has said this. He's basically said, look, the only way I'm going to support this is if we get the fairness through that bill, but any windfall in additional taxes that the state of Indiana collects because of it, I'm going to return to the taxpayer by lowering the rate. So let's say that the sales tax rate's 5% in Indiana, and I'm just making this up hypothetically. Let's say it's 5%, you get in $100 million. You reduce the rate, whatever the equivalent would be. Let's say you reduce it from 5 to 4. And that way, you have provided the fairness that we need for businesses across state lines and what have you. But you have advocated for the people in the state in this building to take that extra money that they get and return it to the taxpayers. And then if the taxpayers want more money spent, then they can let that be known and vote on it. But I think Texas is going to get $1 billion extra. They may need some of that. They may not.
They need $24 billion from what they cut last time.
Well, they need to make the case to the taxpayers that this new money that comes in that they haven't been getting these other years is money they need. And what I'm looking at doing, and I'm still working on the details, I'm looking at not changing Congressman Womack's bill. He's worked hard on that bill. But making the case from a communication standpoint that if I support it, my support is contingent upon advocating here. Certainly would request that the governor and the members of the state legislature here request that they take any windfall we get and return it to the taxpayer by lowering the tax rates.
All right, last question. We're running out of time. We got to keep you on schedule and everybody else. You don't have an announced opponent yet in your re-election bid. Does that trouble you? You think you're going to get a pass?
I am confident that I will get an opponent. That's why they have a number of days for people to file. Just because there's not an opponent on day one doesn't mean there won't be one on day 4 or 5. Look, I totally plan on getting an opponent. I would be shocked if I didn't. And I will be ready in every way to talk about the promises I made last time, the promises I've kept, and I would emphasize that we have changed the debate in Washington, and we certainly don't need to elect someone to rubber stamp the president's agenda. So I'm looking forward to it. We will see what happens. If I am blessed not to have an opponent, then certainly we'll take that. But I believe we'll get an opponent.
So if we don't elect someone to rubber stamp the president's agenda, then you're assuming that the president's going to get reelected, right?
Well, I'm just preparing for the worst.
Okay.
I'm preparing for the worst.
All right. Congressman Tim Griffin, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Talk Politics. Join us again next time.